The city smelled of iron and rain, and the peculiar living stink of Gamma. For nights the docks had hummed with men who thought they could harness a god's spoil, with scientists muttering formulas into dead lights and soldiers who kept their hands steady only because the money was steady. Emil Blonsky had stepped from the harbor like a bruise-made flesh, body a riot of hammered muscle and corded tendon, skin a mottled carapace that reflected the sodium lights like wet stone. He had been a soldier first, then a puppet, then a calculation gone monstrous. Rage had written his name in a language of broken bones and scarred fists. He moved through the city with the deliberate, ugly grace of a thing that knew how to break things and had learned to enjoy it. Word reached the slopes above in a different register, a tremor in the old stones of the temple, whispers of a divinity, restless from a long feast, a god who measured men against myth and found them wanting. Hercules came down from the mountain as if the mountain itself had shrugged. He wore no armor save the bronze of his forearms and the patience of a creature used to scarcity of surprise. In his chest burned a curiosity older than empires, a thing that made him answer any summons to battle, not because of prize, but because strength without purpose bored him. He had carried the world in stories, and once in a test that smelled of blasphemy and mercy, had literally held the heavens until Athena laughed and took the sky back. That memory sat beside others, triumphs, errors, loves and betrayals, each a chisel in the statue of the man-god. When he first saw Abomination, the god did not scoff. He watched, slow as a predator savoring the first step of a foolish prey. Blonsky's eyes flashed humanly for a second. Fear, hunger, the particular vertigo of being both less and more than what had been promised to him. The philosophical axis of this city's fate turned on two questions neither man could answer by measure alone. What is strength when distilled to its essence, and what justifies the right to wield it? Hercules, raised by gods and routined by war, believed strength must be tempered by a telos, an end that dignifies the exertion. Strength for glory is less noble than strength for protection. Strength for protection is less noble than strength used to sustain the fragile order of the weak. Emil, whose birth name had been lost beneath Gamma and ambition, believed strength answered the single law he had learned in barracks and back alleys: possession begets right. To him power was currency, to be taken and spent to buy respect, fear, and the illusion of control. The city, a field of glass and steel, became an arena for an argument older than both of them. Philosophers in torn shirts would later call it a debate conducted in bone and lightning, a proposition that the right to dominate cannot be assumed by those who suffer without asking whether domination remedies suffering. Hercules asked aloud, in the only language that truly matters in the hours before battle, deeds. He walked to the heart of the ruptured port, his shadow a blunt weapon cutting over shattered hulls as Abomination paced among cranes like a colossus in a playground. They exchanged no promises, there were no bargains. The air hung heavy, thunder like a drum roll from the mountain, the faint ionic tinge of Gamma like a sour perfume. Citizens fled into the night. Priests crossed themselves with hands that trembled. Old soldiers stood silent because to open the mouth in that place is to invite the roar of gods or monsters. Hercules felt the old hunger rise, a desire to test measure, to calibrate his own arm against a new force and find the universe consistent. Abomination felt the venom of human envy. He wanted not only to break Hercules' arm, but to break the idea that gods were anything more than men with better weapons. The scene was thus prepared, not by the slant of sunlight nor by the orchestration of generals, but by difference made manifest, temperament versus fury, stewardship versus possession. Each had an army of memory behind him. For Hercules, a genealogy of divine obligation and heroic failure. For Blonsky, a ledger of betrayals, of men who used him, of experiments that promised dignity and delivered monstrosity. The stakes were not merely victory or defeat. The city's children would later whisper that the man who won had proven a kind of truth about what strength ought to mean. The philosopher in Hercules wanted to demonstrate that strength, guided by purpose and humility, stabilizes the world. The man in Abomination wanted to show that raw, unmediated force rewrites fate, and that the world is honest only to those who can break it. As twilight solidified, lightning braided itself into the bronze of Hercules' mace, a gift of Hephaestus for a man who sometimes forgot that a god's art can be a mortal's tool. Emil flexed, Gamma ichor beading along a lip split by a grin that was half pain, half anticipation. There was silence before the storm, but in that silence everything else was already moving toward consequence. Hercules stepped forward, not with a speech, but with a gesture that promised a fight, measured in meaning. Abomination roared, and the first continent of sound broke like a wall into the night. Plates, Impact that did not merely rearrange the city, but argued for a nature of the cosmos. Abomination's fist, curved like an anvil, struck first, and the sound it made was the sound of buildings deciding which of them would stand. Hercules moved with a speed that belied the heaving music of his muscles. He parried with the flat of his bronze, felt the shock trace into his bones, and returned a blow that was the answer the world had been waiting for. Buildings shook, a crane folded like a twig. Blood met sweat and the air tasted of ozone and copper. Abomination surged, each strike a sermon of contempt, force as doctrine. Hercules met doctrine with practice, each counter not merely a blow but a syllable in an argument, where physicality stood in for rhetoric. The god tested limits like a scholar testing a theorem's edges. Abomination's strength was prodigious, enough to carve a canyon with a sweep, enough to send armored trucks flying like paper. He had the grim advantage of grudge-fueled escalation. The angrier he became, the more gamma pulsed through him, the more the ground obeyed his will. Yet there was a plateau to his growth. Rage amplified power but did not grant comprehension. It was brute arithmetic answering brute force. Hercules, by contrast, had a kind of composure that functioned like leverage. Where Abomination multiplied force, Hercules multiplied purpose. He baited Blonsky into commitments, feints that left openings, shifts that turned the Gamma Titan's momentum against itself. He used the environment not merely as backdrop, but as hypothesis, slamming Abomination through a dockside warehouse to strip him of momentum, using debris to wedge a limb, and then wrenching with a torque that rendered Abomination's own weight a liability. Twice Abomination tore a lane through the city with a scream that made glass fall like snow. Twice Hercules rose from the rubble, laughing not mockingly, but with the giddy cruelty of one who finds a worthy problem. Their blows created new geography, a crater that steamed with the city's broken arteries, a highway bent like a bow. Citizens who had watched from the safety of subterranean tunnels told later how Hercules paused once in the heart of the fight to block a collapsing hospital wing with his bare shoulder, fingers clenched in the broken concrete as if holding up an idea. That moment crystallized the philosophical thrust. Hercules' power was not merely to harm, but to hold. Abomination's philosophy recoiled. He had sought to impose order by frightening the world into submission, but that hospital pause revealed the subtlety his rage could not purchase, the ability to choose what to protect and what to shatter. Anger flared into something crueler, envy sharpened by the sight of mercy. Abomination unleashed a move that almost cost Hercules his breath, a crushing bear hug that threatened to finish the argument through pulverization. Bones screamed, bronze dented, but Hercules had endurance of myth. He rooted himself against the hurled building and used the hold as a lever, pivoting with a lordly cruelty that turned Abomination's sin of possession into a crucible. He bent the Gamma Beast backward and slammed him into a bedrock column that had outlived empires. The impact made both men taste faint iron in their mouths. Damage tracked across Abomination like a map of his failures, a cracked horn of bone, a rib angled wrong, but his fury only ballooned. He rose and the ground obeyed him like a resentful servant, quaking and cracking where he stepped. He hit Hercules with a combination chosen as much by memory as intent, the soldier in him recalling moves meant to incapacitate, the monster improvising raw shock. For a moment Hercules stumbled, the god's face a study in focus as he felt the limits of even his own immortality. He understood then why so many men had traded safety for the ugly economy of fear. He tasted the logic of Blonsky's life and felt the old pity for men who thought the world owed them fear. Pity was a dangerous companion. He checked it, let it settle into steel. Instead, he did not deign to pity further. Instead, he embodied a harder thing, responsibility. He channeled a divine cadence into his arms, a slow crescendo meant not as spectacle but as decision. He struck Abomination not to humble him for sport but to close his capacity to harm. His mace fused with the fire of Hephaestus and the lightning of Zeus, struck with a tone that felt like judgment. The blow was not a single strike but a trilogy of strikes, each calculated to undo a layer of Abomination's advantage. First to collapse his footing, second to disrupt the gamma feedback loop by targeting the thoracic core where Blonsky's mutated physiology concentrated, third to shatter the psychological construction of invincibility that Blonsky had used as a shield. The last was unseen by the crowd but visible in Abomination's eyes, a dawning realization that power without end can be an abyss rather than a throne. Abomination's fury fury, great as it was, proved to be a pressure that could be channeled, contained, and finally released in a controlled fashion. Hercules' training, divine, martial, and ethical, lent him the patience to invest strength where it would count. He did not pulverize the Gamma Titan into oblivion. He dismantled him with an economy of force that left the city salvageable, and the man under the shell alive enough to perhaps one day choose differently. In the final sequence, Hercules caught a charging Abomination mid-sprint, his arms like iron bands around the mutant's chest, and in a motion both brutal and reverent, he lifted him high above the ruined quay. The god held the monster up as though weighing fate itself, and for a heartbeat, he did not look triumphant. He looked solemn, as if considering whether to end the chapter or allow a new one. He slammed Abomination down with the kind of controlled violence that breaks a spine's resolve without destroying the possibility of redemption. When the dust settled and gamma steam rose from the crater, Abomination lay unconscious, broken but breathing, his chest heaving with life that was stubborn as a weed. Hercules knelt, pressed his palms to the earth as if to assure whatever gods listened that strength had been applied with care. Around them, the city's people exhaled the breath they had been holding for hours. Some cried, some prayed, some simply stared, newly literate in the grammar of power. Philosophers would later argue that Hercules' victory was not merely a testament to superior muscle, but to the governance of strength by ends. He had demonstrated that strength, when disciplined by obligation, becomes a stabilizing principle. When left to appetite, it becomes entropy. Emil Blonsky would survive, and that survival was part of the parable. To be defeated by restraint is also to be given a chance to recalibrate one's purpose. Hercules walked away into the first light, like a man who had proven something essential that might refine by meaning is the true measure of a winner. The city rebuilt. Children played in the shadow of the new quay and told one another a lesson sewn in broken concrete, that the greatest power was never the ability to destroy, but the choice to protect what cannot defend itself.